Drinking, partying, wearing green, St. Patrick's Day. What happens when you drink a little too much and have a little too much fun? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let's hear 3 horror stories where the hangover was the least of their problems. I accidentally picked up a prostitute on St. Patrick's Day once. This happened on St. Patrick's Day 2008, about a month after I got my driver's license. My buddy Eric and I had nothing to do, so we decided to cruise around the Pike, a long stretch of highway surrounded by bars and strips and clubs and restaurants and general scenery, and enjoy the fact that I could finally drive at night. Prior to driving down the Pike, we stopped at a convenience store to get some grub. As we were about to eat the food in my car, an older, very thin black woman approached my vehicle. Being an anxiety-stricken teenager with not-so-fast reflexes, I did nothing. She tapped on the window, which I rolled down just a crack. I noticed she had a horrible lazy eye. I've got a lazy eye too, but her one eye was darting off in 100 different directions, and was dressed somewhat promiscuously. She was a twig though, so even her tight-knit fishnet stockings were loose on her bare-bone legs. She looked at me with the one normal eye and asked me if I could give her a ride to the liquor store, which was a couple miles down the Pike. I should make it clear that if this were to happen today, I wouldn't have made the mistake of letting her in the car, but I was a dumb kid, so that's exactly what I did. Eric got out of the passenger side and sat behind it instead, and the woman got in and sat beside me. As we drove down the Pike, she started asking us questions. It started off as small talk. Where are you guys from? How old are you? What are you doing driving around on St. Patty's Day? And eventually she asked if we were looking to party. We assured her that we were not looking to party, and she smiled and said, "Oh no? 2 good-looking boys like yourself must be trying to get parties tonight." So I continued telling her that we were just trying to have a calm and normal night. Soon, she mentioned that a friend of hers had just gotten off work and asked if we like Hispanic women, which was a very what the fuck out of the blue question. I told her I, didn't mind Hispanic women, I suppose, and she smiled. Good, she's looking to party tonight too. I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out, but it was about that time that the unnerving thought popped into my head. Dude, I think you just picked up a fucking hooker. If that was true, then I had already broken the law, so a bit of me went into panic mode as she proceeded to ask us more questions. She asked us if we drank, and then immediately reminded me that I was taking her to a liquor store. Before long, we finally reached the liquor store, and as I pulled in, I noticed that the parking lot was completely empty, except for a pickup truck. A man was seated in the driver's seat of the truck, and upon seeing us, he turned his car on and drove around me, blocking the exit. My first thought was, oh god, it's a fucking ambush. The man stepped out of his vehicle and began yelling at me. I rolled down the window to hear what he was saying, and heard, "She's bad news, man." Without hesitation, I turned the car off, grabbed the keys, and leaped out of the car, not even shutting the door behind me. "What do you mean?" I asked him. "That woman in your car is a prostitute," he told me, confirming my earlier suspicions. "She's walked around here with that Wawa back there and asked man a driver to buy booze and then get to a motel around a mile down the road. She's bad news, man." Relieved that this guy was evidently on my side, I let out a massive sigh of relief and begged him to help me. Again, I was a stupid teenager, and I had absolutely no idea what the hell to do. Back at the car, the lazy-eyed woman of the evening stuck her head out the open door and asked if anything was wrong. The guy from the pickup truck angrily yelled, "Get out of the car now!" She didn't listen. I could hear her muttering, "It's alright, they're cool, it's all cool." My savior in the pickup marched over to the car and swung open her door. He growled for her to get out once more and didn't even wait for a response. He grabbed the chick and pulled her out, shoving her away. The entire time she kept mumbling, Nah, everything's alright. They said they're cool with us. As my friend stepped out from the back seat and hopped into the front seat, slamming and locking the door behind him. The guy yelled at her once more, and she vanished behind the liquor store. I thanked him about a dozen times, and he warned me to never pick up strangers again before driving off. I hopped back in the car and sped away, nerves shot to oblivion. And today, I refuse to go near that fucking Wawa, especially around March. St. Patrick's Day Stupidity. I'll preface this by saying I was being really frickin' stupid when this happened, for no good reason really. So if it seems like I'm being an idiot, at any or many points, it's because I was. Also warning for foul language. A couple years ago when I was the tender age of 20, I was getting dinner in my neighborhood when this random dude comes up to me, introduces himself as Zach, and invites me to a St. Patrick's Day party at his place that evening. He's kinda cute. He's with a friend, so he's marginally less sketchy than he would have been by himself. And I'm like, well, it's St. Patrick's Day, I don't have any plans, and I can't buy liquor by myself yet, so why not? Let's party at this dude's house. I agree to come by later, get my dinner and head home. Later comes, and my roommate and I head over to his place, which is just a couple blocks away from ours. From the get-go, it's kind of weird. The house is really quiet. Like you'd expect to hear a party even from the outside, but no, dead silent. But I'm like, well, maybe it's in the basement or something. So we knock, and Zach answers the door. He kind of looks surprised to see us, but he lets us in and no party. Just Zach and what looks like his roommate, hanging out on the couch in their bare-ass living room watching TV. There are empty liquor bottles everywhere. At this point, I'm a little skeeved, and my roommate is very skeeved, but we decided to hang tight for a minute and see what happens. We chat with the dudes. Zach comments on my roommate's fingernails, weird, and Zach's roommate doesn't really say anything, weird. And eventually my roommate decides to leave. I'm about to go with her when Zach invites me to do some spray painting with him in the basement. I'm an artsy type, and this sounded like a pretty cool idea to me, so I decided to go for it. He encouraged me to do a shot, which I accepted, and grabbed me a beer. And for a while it was pretty fun actually. I spray painted a dragon on the wall, and he wrote, "I heart you" on another wall. Weird. And tried to kiss me. I laughed him off without a kiss, and he went to get me a fresh beer. I was about done, but I had the second beer and then went upstairs to head out. Zach insisted on one more shot. I wasn't feeling it, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I'm a super lightweight, so at this point I was pretty messed up. I told him I should head out, but he started to usher me into his bedroom. I was still laughing, but underneath I was uncomfortable, looking for my purse, which I couldn't find in my drunkenness. But he was still pushing me into his room, towards his bed. I started to get scared. I insisted that I needed to find my purse. As I was searching for it, pulling away from him when he tried to distract me from it, I was hyper-conscious that I couldn't see his roommate or anyone else around me. After what felt like forever, I found it under a shirt. Deliberately hidden? Maybe. And I turned to go. By this point, I was very frightened. My heart was hammering. I realized that this guy got me a little screwed up just to have sex with me, and I wanted to go. I told him I was leaving, and I headed for the door, which he was standing next to. He grabbed my arm. Now, he was a pretty big guy, and I'm a super tiny girl, but I reacted to this super fast and super negatively, and I don't think he was ready for it. I whipped around and snarled, "Let go of my fucking arm right now, asshole!" And he did. He looked super startled. just like I'd socked him in the face or something. I booked it out of there and didn't look back. I was shaking and practically scared sober. Here's the thing though, I don't think that this dude even know what he was doing was a kind of rape. I think he's done it before and that everyone else was just barely willing enough or too polite to react the way I did. Immediately, loudly, and unforgivingly. I think he let go of me because he didn't think of himself as a rapist, and being treated like one kicked his feet out from under him, enough for me to get away. Which, frankly, is fucking terrifying in its own right. A few weeks later, I saw Zach on the street. Not unusual, we live in the same area, and he tried to talk to me again. I put up a stop hand and breezed past him without a word. Blessedly, after that I never saw him again. So, St. Patrick's Day would-be rapist, let's not meet. Ever. Strange Mountain Man. I've been lurking here for a long time, never really expecting to post anything. After an experience I had earlier this week, however, I decided it'd be a good idea to post it here while the details are still fresh in my mind. St. Patrick's Day is a crazy occasion in most cities, and in my hometown of Dublin is no exception. Last week I found myself with a few days off on either side of our national holiday, and so decided to get away from the madness of the city and spend some time camping and hiking in the nearby mountains. On the eve of my trip with my buddy, he called me to tell me that he was sick and wouldn't be joining on the adventure. Who needs him, I thought, and decided to make this trip alone. The weather was beautiful, and I spent a very enjoyable St. Patrick's Day hiking through the woods and mountains above Dublin alongside a good number of similar-minded folks. At roughly 4 p.m., I spotted a nice thicket of trees in the distance and made my way towards what looked like a perfect campsite. I found a clearing, set up my shelter, and prepared a delicious dinner before settling down with a book and the sounds of the wilderness for company. At 7 p.m., something changed. I suddenly became very uncomfortable and agitated. There was someone nearby, somehow I just knew it. It was completely dark. I scanned the surrounding woods with my torch, but could see nothing out of the ordinary. It was just me and the trees. Settled down, I told myself, it's natural to feel a bit scared when you're alone in the woods. But no matter how much I tried to clear my mind, I couldn't shake the gut feeling that the situation just wasn't right. I knew that the last bus left the nearest village at 10:30 p.m., and that I was roughly 3 hours away by foot. In the heat of the moment, I decided to get the hell out of there and take my chances on the trail. I packed my gear in record time and moved out, stumbling over fallen trees and the thick gorse until I hit the trail. I was in a panic, but comforted by the well-trodden path. A half hour of gentle descent, and I'd be on paved road, and after that, it was only an hour to the well-frequented regional road that led to the village. After only a few hundred meters, however, I was stopped in my tracks. Sitting on a tree stump, just off to the side of the trail, sat a lone figure. By the light of my headlamp, I saw that it was a man dressed in dark street clothes, rather than the bright hiking gear one might expect. I was instantly on edge. There was no point in trying to hide, as he had no doubt already seen me with the headlamp and reflective jacket. We drew closer in the darkness, and I saw that he was roughly in his 30s. As I passed him, he looked at me, smiled and said, "Lovely evening." Yes, it is. I said something like that anyways. It was probably more of a mumble. I continued forward, on my guard. After about a minute or two, I turned to look behind me and saw no sign of the man I just passed. There was a house a kilometer or so in the distance, and I thought the best thing to do would be to stop there for directions to the village road. Several minutes later, I again felt a pang of uneasiness and checked the path behind me, only to see the figure once again, this time on foot, heading the same direction as me. I hurried towards the house. I felt much more relaxed once I reached the warm glow of the cottage. I got directions from a nice elderly couple and was pleased to learn that the road was just a small distance away from the bottom of their driveway. With no sign of the mountain man behind me, I walked on. Just as I reached the road, I heard a banging noise from the direction of the house, followed by an out-of-breath yet familiar voice. I've been separated from my friend. Did he come this way? Without thinking, I scrambled up the embankment at the side of the road and concealed myself as best I could, one hand on my camping knife. My heart has never beat so fast. I couldn't hear the householder's reply, just the sounds of the door closing, followed by footsteps on the gravel driveway. I saw the man, silhouetted by the moonlight, walk into the road and peer into the distance in either direction before hurrying off in the opposite direction of the village. I waited in the hedgerow for, I suppose, 15 or 20 minutes, terrified, before picking up the courage to continue my walk to civilization. I trudged on for over an hour before I heard the rumble of a car engine in the distance and saw its headlight approach. I stuck out my thumb, and to my surprise, the driver stopped. I asked if he could give me a ride into the village, and he said no problem. Once in the car, the driver, a friendly Polish man, asked if I was looking for my friend. Friend? No, I was out hiking alone and I just lost track of time. I lied, not wanting to admit I got scared camping alone. Oh, I only asked because I was just flagged down by another young man who told me he was looking for his friend, and you fit his description perfectly. He seemed very agitated. In shock, I told the driver about my encounter with the mountain man and how he had headed in the opposite direction for over an hour ago. Well, he must have turned around because he stopped me only a few hundred meters behind the spot where I picked you up. 5 minutes later, I was back in the well-lit, well-populated village. I made it in time for the bus, and within the hour was back in Dublin city centre. I have no idea what was going on with that man or what he intended to do if he caught up to me. I'm just glad I followed my gut and was lucky enough to make it home with nothing more than an odd story. And a big thank you to Darius for the lift.